It's a bright and sunny morning here at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium for round number 4 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. A great day ahead of us with a 2-hour race this afternoon as we move into the middle part now of the 2021 season. Morning warm-up just a few minutes away, the last chance for the teams and drivers to get out onto the circuit, check the conditions and prepare themselves for the 2-hour race ahead. Qualifying and free practice yesterday was dramatic. We had a little bit of everything yesterday. The first free practice session took place in conditions much like this, really. Pretty mild, fairly humid, and then that humidity turned into heavy rain through the middle of the day. We had a very wet second free practice session that unfortunately caught 1 or 2 cars out, and then qualifying was thankfully back in dry conditions once again. Fairly low track temperature at the moment, just under 15 degrees, certainly a lot cooler than it was yesterday, but of course that should keep climbing as long as that sun stays shining and the sky stays blue. Andy McEwen up here in the commentary box, David Addison alongside me. David, qualifying yesterday was an experience. In fact, the whole of yesterday was a bit of an experience, wasn't it, really? One of those days where there was drama around every corner.
Absolutely. There's drama in the build-up to the event with a few shuffles of the entry list. As soon as cars hit the track, they were hitting barriers. We lost one on Friday. We lost a couple yesterday. Yeah, it's been a dramatic weekend, absolutely. And it's one of those weekends where I think many of the teams are glad to get to Sunday morning. Even though the work now starts, they've got a race to do. They've made it through all the previous sessions. Some with big bills, but now at least they can go racing. We're in for a really interesting race, not only because of the circuit, not only because of whatever the weather throws at us, but also because it's that 2-hour race. It's a 2-hour sprint rather than a 2-hour endurance. So you have really got to be on your toes. And with 62 minutes being the minimum that you can do in a GT3 car before pitting, the AMs do make a big part of the race. So the amateur drivers, talking GT3 specifically, play a really big part in all of this. It's going to be really interesting to see how that GT3 fight pans out. So we've got the fast lane open, teams making their way down to the pit lane, eager to get on track. It's not totally dry running, Andy, is it? There's still 1 or 2 damp patches around, but weather really fantastic compared to what we had to endure this time yesterday.
But this is Spa, and in another half an hour it could change completely. So there is a quick look at the circuit up at Lake Com, a couple of damp patches as David was saying. And the circuit will continue to evolve, hopefully in a positive manner, and keep drying out. But yes, David, a couple of drivers yesterday, particularly in that second free practice session, did struggle. We had the number 9 BMW off into the barriers, and a really unfortunate incident for Team Parker Racing.
Absolutely. We'd lost already by the mid part of free practice the Lipe at Lamborghini. Brendan Leach had an off at the so-called Speaker's Corner. But then, yeah, Scott Mulvern in the Team Parker Porsche had a sizable off. Now this shows you A, the sizable off, and B, how horrible the weather was. But this was going through Eau Rouge up to Radion, a big hit into the tyres. And you might think, well, he only did the rear of the car, but it was a big hit. Scott went to hospital to be checked over. He's okay, he's fine, but the car isn't. And ironically, when we were talking to Stuart Parker on Friday, he was saying, we don't know what to do with this car. You know, it's just great. It comes into the pits and we stand there and we think, well, what can we do? Because it just goes round and round and round. Sadly, they had a lot to do, and too much to be able to do away from base, as it were. So that car's had to be withdrawn, which is a real shame. Now, they're ready to go. Number 90, the McLaren that Balfe Motorsport runs for Jack Brown and Ashley Marshall. That was a really quick GT4 car in its session yesterday.
Yes, they actually had a really strong qualifying session. Balfe Motorsport have qualified 4th on the grid within the GT4 part of qualifying, but you're right, in the first session they were actually the 2nd fastest car out there, which is a surprise only in as much as we haven't really seen the best of the GT4 McLarens. The 570Ss have struggled a little bit, with all of them running into difficulties in our most recent race at Donington Park. Sadly, Rocket RJN, who run 3 of those GT4 McLarens, they haven't escaped the dramas here at Spa either. The number 2 car was out before we actually got here on Saturday morning. They had a crash in testing on Friday, and so unfortunately no James Kell or Jordan Collard. James Kell for sure is still here, I think, helping out the team. Jordan Collard, I presume, the same, but a shame not to have them out there as well.
And apparently it was James Outlap, so it's a really odd off that he had coming through Blanchimont. So whether it was a breakage. We also had a breakage yesterday, didn't we, in qualifying for Sam NEARY, who is always spectacular, but then towards the end of the session he had an off going into La Source, the car drifted left onto the grass, had a big spin, couldn't rejoin, and we wondered at the time whether something might have broken because it was such a strange incident, and it was a wishbone.
A top right front wishbone, yes. Yeah. And this, of course, after an accident they'd had in practice as well. Sam went off at the exit of Les Combes fairly heavily, damaged a lot of the left-hand side of the car, although they claimed that it was only cosmetic damage. But, yes, then that qualifying issue, unfortunately, meant that after Richard NEARY had gone second fastest in qualifying session 1 for GT3, Sam NEARY wasn't able to post a time. He had completed a lap that was disallowed for track limits, and had that stood, they might have been able to start top 5, but because he didn't eventually complete a lap, he will start from the back. And there is the not exactly showroom condition Mercedes-AMG GT3. It's had a hard life, that car, but as we saw last time at Donington, it's still capable of winning.
It is the Rasputin of GT3. It is unkillable, that car. If ever it comes up for sale, you'll get a good deal on it, but it will have been well used. But it's quick, it's effective, and it's been a great platform for Sam NEARY to show his ability, whether it's been in this or indeed in the club-level GT Cup, in which they've gone off and gained experience as well. And in fact, Sam was one of the committed drivers and a front runner within the British GT Esports Championship back at the start of the year, March-April time. So, just tick off one more point while we wait for the outlap to be completed. You mentioned track limits and how people were losing lap times for that. It was a regular aspect of qualifying yesterday, that because of the length of the lap, people were being told this lap's not going to count, even as they were completing it. So the officials were able to have a look long before the car got to the line, and people were losing lap times on the lap that they were doing the offence. Now, it could well move into the race as well, couldn't it, track limit abuse, and therefore penalties may well be an issue as we get through the race as well. We'll have to wait and see. Different conditions, but of course in the dry, people are going to push that bit harder anyway.
Exactly. It's the top of Radion and the exit of the chicane, I think, that the issues were happening, and a little bit out of Blanchimont, but they were the two common places. This was Sam NEARY's incident. There you can see the car snap violently to the left, got onto the grass, and around it went, and that was when that top right front wishbone snapped. We did wonder whether maybe he'd abused the curbs a bit too much. I know they made a setup change, Team ABBA, between FP2 and qualifying. They softened the suspension so they could use more curbs, so it's clearly something that both Richard and Sam enjoyed doing, but you do have to look after the car as well.
Yeah, and 2 hours, don't forget. I know it's an obvious point, but these are not two 1-hour races where you've got repair time in the middle. You've got to keep that car going, and it's got to be competitive. And GT3 might have a slightly smaller entry this weekend, and it's dwindled a touch because of dramas over the weekend, but even so, it is mighty, mighty competitive out there, and that means that everybody's going to be on the limit for the 2 hours. Now, Andrew Howard, different co-driver for him this weekend. Johnny Adam not able to be here for circumstances completely outside of his control, so Ross Gunn is reloaded into the Beechdene Aston Martin, and Andrew Howard, of course, comes here as the joint championship leader with Johnny Adam, but with tying on points Ian Loggy and Jelmer Berman. So there's the race to bear in mind. There's also the championship situation to bear in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, Beechdene and Ram Racing have both qualified well. Beechdene AMR, Andrew Howard and Ross Gunn, second on the grid. Ram Racing's Ian Loggy and Jelmer Berman third, but they will both have these pesky success penalties to serve. So that rather plays into the hands, doesn't it, of a car that we didn't see a lot of at Donington Park, the 63 Barwell Motorsport Lamborghini, out at the first corner, but Leo Machitsky and Dennis Lind stuck it on pole position yesterday. No success penalty. The car's clearly working well. Are they the favourites for the race, do you think?
Possibly. Leo Machitsky knows his way around here very well. He's done many a British GT race. He's done 7, 8 Spa 24 hours, so he knows the circuit very well indeed. This is the foot cam of the number 5 McLaren. Stuart Proctor at the wheel as he comes down through Point. He's being careful. You wait till Lewis gets into that car, his son, for his stints. He may not even do the warm-up, but he's a lot more committed than Dad. But Stuart, for the moment, just playing himself in, discovering which the track lines are with the damp patches to one side. So he goes through the pith path there, and as he does so, Stuart Proctor playing himself in. He's let the Lamborghini number 1 go by, which has got Adam Ballon at the wheel of it. But for the moment, McLaren there heads down to Campus, the right-hander, and onto the court, Paul Frere, getting up to pace.
Yeah, you can tell who's in this car based on which foot they're using to brake. Lewis, son, pro driver, left foot brake. Stuart, dad, Am, does not, and so you can see his right foot's doing all the work really now. Not much for it to do here really, just keep it planted on the throttle up the hill towards Blanchimont. This must be a really exhilarating piece of racetrack in a GT3 car. A little bit of a lift though just as he went into Blanchimont. then gets back down onto it. But this track temperature is not that high at the moment. The ambient's quite nice, but the track hasn't warmed up yet, and there isn't really a lot of points in pushing too hard in a warm-up session, is there? So I think easy does it is the way to go.
Yeah, and Stuart Proctor wouldn't claim to be the pro driver in that car. He wants to do a good job, a good stint, be safe and solid, and not lose too much time in his stint, which is the same for many of the AMs. Just going back to Leo Micicki, having talked about him as the pole position driver from his session yesterday, we then slightly dropped him in it, because when he was interviewed on TV, somebody watching noticed that he didn't have one of the required sponsors' badges on his overalls. So while he was very pleased to have got pole position and to talk to Bryn Lucas in the pits, he was then relieved of 250 quid for a championship regulation breach for not wearing one of the sponsors' patches. You win some, you lose some.
Yes, I think he'll probably take that, won't you, in the grand scheme of things. Second fastest at the moment is Micicki. Sam Neary, perhaps unsurprisingly, has taken the car straight out there and set the fastest lap time of the session. For reference, a 2:24.303 is about 2.2 seconds off the, 3.2 seconds off the very fastest times the pros were doing in qualifying. So even Sam Neary not quite extracting the maximum out of the Mercedes for the time being.
But there's no need, is there? I mean, this isn't about a time. This is about making sure that, in their case, the car has been rebuilt properly overnight. It's about making sure that brakes are good, tyres are scrubbed, you are content in the car, get through this without dramas. And it's one of the reasons why not that many teams insist on doing the warm-up. You know, yes, the track time is there. Some teams always want to do it. They want the track time. Quite often you'll find one or two teams skip it because they're happy and there's no point going out. It's only 15 minutes of running that might give you a problem, and then you're in strife going into the race. There are plenty that have yet to do a time. There's one car that hasn't gone out at all, which I've got a feeling might be the Speedworks Toyota, actually. But certainly there are a good number that haven't done a time at all yet.
No, John Ferguson has gone out and back in again,
yeah.
So not entirely sure. We'll get to we'll round them all up as they come in at the end and see who didn't come back in. But
how about the GTC class Ferrari,
which is
number 99, the Omar Jackson, Charlie Hollins?
Yeah, you're right. That one hasn't gone out. So they didn't have any issues yesterday that we were aware of, so that looks like a choice they made not to go out rather than their hand being forced. So Sam Neary pits then, hopefully happy with the Mercedes rather than reporting issues. There is the Toyota then. This car looked really, really quick yesterday, but then missed out on pole position in GT4 after a really good effort by Will Burns and Gus Burton, the GT4 Championship leaders. But whisper it, might their first win be coming this afternoon, do you think?
It's certainly possible, because it's the right kind of car for Spa, and Toyota came within a whisker of a win in the French GT round, the equivalent car of that. Yesterday, Antoine Potty had a late race puncture, which caused a spin and a big chunk of time to be lost. OK, that was a very wet race and all sorts of rubbish was being dragged onto the racetrack. But even so, the Toyota, a good car for Spa.
Ginetta, however, have not always had a brilliant history here, but Mark Sansom, who's at the wheel of this Ginetta G56, run by Seto Motorsport, he shares it with Charlie Robertson, still enjoying his British GT racing, I'm sure. Didn't really enjoy Donington that much, but he's back at Spa now. The car does seem to be a little off the pace. They have qualified at the back of the GT4 grid, but Ginetta continuing to develop this G56, which does look an awful lot like a G55, but underneath, I believe there is a lot that's different, and I'm sure as the season goes on, and we're heading to some circuits that should suit them quite nicely. I think Snetterton, Alton Park, some of the more technical circuits. I think a win is also on the cards for them at some point this year.
Well, they came close at Brands Hatch, didn't they?
Then
it was a late race puncture that did for the Assetto Ginetta. Jim Edwards Jr. and his son-in-law Simon Traves team. Simon, who's busy running this and won Make Ginettas and racing and winning in his Brisker F1 stock car. Jim concentrating on the team and also making sure that daughter Jade is still doing the right things in British touring cars, which he definitely is. There is a very quick car from yesterday, number 61, the Ford Mustang that Matt Cowley shares with Will Moore, and that's another car that's suited for Spa, isn't it? It's got bags of horsepower.
Yeah, I kind of expected that car to be in the hunt for pole position in GT4. Certainly in the first session when Matt Cowley was at the wheel, it was one of, if not the fastest car, wasn't it, in Q1 for GT4. But then Will Moore couldn't quite extract the same sort of pace from it, and so his lap was actually significantly slower than the Matt Cowley time, and so 6th place on the grid for the Ford Mustang, which has enjoyed success at Spa in the past. 5 minutes left then in this morning warm-up session. The majority of teams have made a pit stop. up. I noticed Sam Neary's gone back out again in the ABBA Racing Mercedes as they continue their shakedown.
No curb is safe. Yeah.
No, well, I did notice on the second of the laps he was doing before through Piff Paff, he was all up the curb, he was sideways. I don't think he knows any other way. There is the number one, Adam Ballon, who, of course, last time we raced here at Spa, had a bit of a shunt at the corner he's just come out of. He had a moment going through Blanchimont during the race and hit the wall, and so he'll be looking to create some slightly happier Spa memories today.
And behind him, Scott McKenna, who has just done an installation lap in the brake fluid coffee back Toyota Supra, comes down the pit lane. Andrew Howard gives way to Ross Gunn by the look of it. Or Ross Gunn gives way to Andrew Howard. They've been switching back and forth, but they've certainly done a practice pit stop for the driver change in all of that. And with 4 minutes to go, I think the car's going to go back out. But again, different teams do different things in this session. It might be that you want to get the car set up, as I said earlier on, with brakes and tyres all sorted out. But equally, it's an opportunity to do practice pit stops and driver changes. And here comes another one now, as the Ewan Hankey Mia Fluid McLaren with 4 minutes to go is going to have a practice pit stop as well. Tyres to be scrubbed for the Mustang.
Yeah, that's another thing that they do choose to do sometimes in these warm-up sessions. Scrub some tyres for later in the day. Car number 4 then.
Now.
Now.
Smoky, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm no mechanic, David, but that doesn't look healthy. What might that be? And then another burst of smoke. This is on board looking out of the front of the McLaren. So, any ideas?
No, because it looked like the car was empty. Nobody was in it at the time, I don't think, but rather strange. So yeah, number 4, good to go now. That's the Harry Hyatt, Katie Milner entry. Harry Hyatt had brought it in. Australian driver, Katie Milner, I think, to be sent out in that car.
Yeah, so that...
Do you want to research, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't seem overly concerned now in that they've sent the car back out again, but yes, a bit of fire extinguisher going off or something, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure.
More grey smoke than white, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, hard to tell in the shadow, I suppose. But, well, we shall send Bryn Lucas down there, who is roaming the pit lane, digging out some stories today, and try and report back either before the end of the session or before the race later on. There's the Newbridge Aston Martin, by the way, just going through a pit stop as well. That's the car that won at Silverstone. They, again, were an early retirement at Donington last time out, though. Good news in a way for Darren Turner, though, because Darren Turner couldn't race at Donington. And had Matt Topham gone and scored some points, that would have essentially written Darren Turner out of championship contention. But as it is, he's back in the team again, and we'll see if he can still go after his first ever British GT title.
Yeah, Darren was busy at Goodwood going up and down the hill in assorted Aston Martins at the Festival of Speed.
Hard life, eh?
Absolutely, yes. Right, Gus Burton then, with the championship leading BMW M4, the Century car. As a silver pairing, they get an extra 26 seconds in the pits, plus 20 seconds for winning at Donington. So their pit stop, 46 seconds longer than, for example, the Toyota, which comes in without any penalty at all, and it's a Pro-Am combination. So you can make up some of that in a 2-hour race, and a safety car might help, but very definitely the silver BMW, silver graded BMW here, goes into the race rather on the back foot.
It does, but they're on pole again, and they've won 2 of the 3 races we've had so far. Granted, they've not yet been able to win with the maximum success penalty. They won at Brands Hatch, they were 4th at Silverstone with a penalty, lost their success penalty, of course, for Donington, where they dominated again. So a podium, I think, could be on the cards for them if we... Well, you say you want a safety car. You don't want one in the first half of the race, but you do rather want one in the second half. But Spa, with its excessive tarmac runoff areas, perhaps the chance of a safety car is a little lower. But that is always a bit of an unknown in these races, and those with success penalties in particular, their races really can be affected by other people going off or stopping or debris on the track that causes Peter Daly to send the safety car out on circuit.
Scott McKenna back on track then in the Toyota Gazoo Racing UK Toyota Supra GR out of La Source. The grunt and go Toyota then plunges downhill. It's a good noise, that car. And in strife is the Mustang, I'm afraid to say. Now that is stranded at Bruxelles. By the look of it, it's gone straight on. Will Moore at the wheel of it. Has it just stopped, or has he had a moment? There are lots of witness marks behind it, but there are lots of people having moments at Spa, so they don't necessarily equate to the Mustang. If it's mechanical, that's rather more of a concern, because you ain't going to know if you fixed it until you go racing, because the flag is imminent.
Yes, morning warm-up then. A little bit of smoke. Is that brake smoke, or...?
I think it's a hot engine.
Yes.
He's trying to restart it, but...
Well, the fact he sat there doing nothing won't be helping the engine cooling, of course, but there doesn't seem to be much you can do about getting the car restarted again. So, yes, you're right, this could be a drama. The checkered flag is now out, morning warm-up is complete, and Dennis Lind has actually just set the fastest lap time of the session by half a second at 2:22.658. That is decent. It's a second or so off what he's capable of, but he goes fastest. Ewan Hankey is second then in the Rocket RJN GT3 McLaren, with Sam NEARY down to third. In GT4, it is Alan Vallant who is fastest from Katie Milner in a Rocket RJN 1-2, and Charlie Robertson in the Ginetta third.
So there is the Mustang, which ain't going anywhere. Let's try and catch up with an earlier problem. The McLaren, Bryn Lucas, we saw rather smoky in the pit lane. What was all that about?
Yeah, it was nothing to worry about. They were just doing a pit. They were just doing a pit stop practice. They said a little bit of fuel came out as they pulled the hose out. So it's just a fire extinguisher. No dramas at all.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bryn. Well done. So that answers that question. And here's the replay of it. So drivers about to leap on board. A little bit of fuel comes out. Was fire extinguishing. You were right, Andy. And thankfully, no dramas. Thumbs up. Get on with the job.
Right. Okay. One of those things that looked more dramatic than it was then, potentially. So, right, that's good news for that McLaren. Good news for another McLaren is that Lewis Proctor, just as I'd said that Dennis Lind was fastest in the session, Lewis Proctor actually went and pipped him, so 2:22.476, now the fastest time in the session, but the majority... well, I say the majority of the field have seen the checkered flag. Dennis Lind is still on a lap and has gone purple in Sector 1, so it looks like Lind is extracting the maximum in this session, trying to get every lap in. I mean, that is a sign of confidence for Barwell in a way. They've already got that car on pole position. You would forgive them, wouldn't you, for really looking after it in this session, but they gave Machitsky some laps to warm himself up early on, and now they've sent Dennis out to see exactly what the car can do. Here he comes out of Blanchimont.
He's not finished yet, is he?
No, twitching around, isn't he?
Absolute best in the first sector. I know it's not qualifying and it won't affect the grid, but I think Dennis Lind would quite like to go and have his porridge for breakfast, knowing that he's been the fastest man around Spa, and he ain't far off. Here he comes up towards the line. Heads towards the timing line. He was down in the middle sector and in the end doesn't improve, but he did have a good go at it. Sandy Mitchell ahead of him on the road did, though, to go second. So Proctor to Mitchell, 27 thousandths at the end of warm-up.
It's been a bit like that all weekend. We had a practice session, didn't we, yesterday, the wet practice session, FP2, which actually saw a tie. It was the first time we'd ever broadcast free practice live for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship, and what a way to do it, with a tie at the top of the times, where two teams set literally identical lap times, around a 2.5-minute lap in the soaking wet conditions. It was Beach Dean AMR's Ross Gunn and Ram Racing's Jelmer Berman, the two drivers in question. So I do agree with you. I think although the entry has thinned a little, we're in for a close and competitive race. Both classes look really, really evenly matched. Unfortunately, though, one of our GT4 cars has had some issues in this session. One of the cars we expected to be up there contending for the win, Academy Motorsport, stopped on track, and Bryn, I believe, has some news on that.
Yeah, I do indeed. Apparently it was just a low battery voltage. They sent the car out low battery voltage. They brought it back in. They've managed to just fix the issue, I'm guessing, change the battery over. And it's all been sent out and they're pretty happy with it. So they all seem very relaxed. There's no dramas again with this one, but that was essentially the problem.
Right, okay.
Curious, though, isn't it? But they should have had that. Bryn, thanks. I mean, Will Moore was only on an out lap. He'd only just left the pit lane. Odd that should be the case. Low battery voltage makes one think that there's something else causing that, like there's an alternator problem lurking in the system. So I suspect that there's going to be quite a bit of work to do to make sure that you've traced it all the way back to why that could happen before you go racing.
Indeed. So, Balf Motorsport then, fastest in morning warm-up for what it's worth. Doesn't count towards anything, but it's a nice little personal achievement, I suppose, isn't it? Sandy Mitchell and Adam Ballon, second fastest in the #1 Barwell car, with their teammates Dennis Lind and Leo Machitsky, third fastest. Ewan Hankey and Mia Flewitt were fourth, ahead of Sam and Richard NEARY, with Berman and Loggy sixth place. Ross Gunn and Andrew Howard for Beach Team were seventh. Then the GT4s, it was the Toyota of Scott McKenna and John Ferguson fastest, ahead of Alan Vallant and Michael Benyai, with Katie Milner and Harry Hayek third in GT4. It's set to be a fantastic race later on. The fourth round of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship will be live from 12:25 local time here at Spa-Francorchamps for a 2-hour race that is set to continue the twists and turns in the story of what is turning into a fascinating 2021 season. Will we see some of the early championship favourites score well again, or will we see another surprise as we did at Donington Park last time? And we'll find out this afternoon. We hope you'll be able to join us for round 4 of the championship here at Spa-Francorchamps in a few hours' time.